You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Johannes Ekström of Avatar. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Today's episode is brought to you by SolidGoldFX. These guys are, they've been with me since day one. They've been very supportive of the whole Tone Mob project, of course, making the Model 1, like you guys know, and so it's nice to have them come on board as a sponsor of the show, and they really, truly are one of my very favorite pedal companies. My first delay was the Electroman by Solid Gold, and I absolutely love that thing to this day. It has an effects loop. That's the pedal I'm talking about whenever I'm talking about playing with effects loops and delays, and it sounds awesome. It has the lovely, lovely runaway switch, so you can get crazy and have a good old time with a big old wash of crazy, fuzzy delay. Whatever you stuck in the effects loop, that's what it's going to do. It's going to make magic happen. So check out the Electroman, and yeah, you'll be very glad you did. This episode is also brought to you by Sinasoid. That's right, the guys with the sweet 100-year warranty on their guitar cables. The guys that are super chill and super awesome, and I don't even know if I can say enough good things about the dudes over at Sinasoid. They have been a huge supporter of the show, and they make awesome products, and if you like what you're hearing, you like guitar, you're going to need some cables at some point, so you might as well support an awesome company who's helping support your local guitar podcast. I mean, right? Why not? And plus, like I said, they got a 100-year warranty. They're really nice. Just the presentation of everything. It's just like you feel like you're really getting something special, and you are. Plus, I have it on good authority that they are the preferred cable of birdwatchers. So, take that information and do with it what you will. Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting episode of the ToneMob.com podcast. I'm your host Blake Weiland, and with me today I have Matt Eich of Mule Resonator Guitars. How you doing, sir?
That's me. Hey, it's pretty cool to be on and doing this, talking to you about these guitars.
I'm pretty excited because I like I told you before, I've played Resonators. I know what they're about and what they sound like for the most part, but I don't really know anything about them or the history behind them or really how they're constructed or anything. I don't know any of the nitty-gritty details, so you would
they're kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the luthier world, where either it's a old National guitar or it's got some crazy lightning bolt hubcap, something on it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely a new kind of thing.
Nice. Well, maybe before we get too into the guitars themselves and what we could get your kind of musical backstory and then how that folded into you doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I guess kind of long story short, I started playing guitar in high school, and when I was about to graduate, I was kind of looking for what I like to do that required the least amount of school possible, and so I ended up at Roberto Van Lutheran School there in Phoenix, and went there, and then kind of traveled around the country doing random jobs for a while. Ended up at Husson Dalton Guitars in Virginia for a few years, and that's kind of where I learned the meat and potatoes of making guitars. It's a pretty small shop. I think we had 11 or 12 employees when I was there. So you were able to do a lot of the work, but most importantly, like a large quantity of work. You know, we were doing 8 guitars a week, so I was carving 4 necks a week and milling up brace stock and binding and all of that stuff. So, you know, after 3 years of doing that, I got my hands on a lot of guitars. Moved to Chicago for a while to help out with some family stuff, and then lost my job in 2009 along with a lot of other people, and ended up moving back to Michigan. Saw Kelly Joe Phelps play Resonator guitar, and kind of left thinking I could maybe possibly learn the metalwork and combine that with the guitar stuff, but also like make one that looked like the natural materials, so without the nickel plating or powder coating. So there was the whole materials and patina involved with that too. So yeah, so it started out with that concert there at Kelly Joe's, and built 4 in the first year, and then ran out of money and ended up at a factory swinging engine blocks, and worked there for 2 weeks and had a wait list. So I quit, and the wait list grew and grew and grew, and now it's now we've got a nice shop, and it's me and my brother Phil and my friend Adam Smith who build them. So yeah, so it was kind of a long story, not so short, but it took a good 13 years between graduating high school to getting the mules going. So I'm pretty happy to be doing it.
That's really cool. So it was just really that one concert in particular that kind of made you go, oh, I think I want to try.
Oh,
the
yeah,
Resonators.
it totally was. I mean, I had never played a Resonator guitar before that show, and like, I mean, 10 years almost exactly before that, I was at Roberto Venn, and I had long hair, and I was into the metal, you know, thing, and I heard Kelly Joe play, and that was the first time where I was like, oh, you can play guitar with your fingers. Like, this is crazy, you know? Like, my experience with acoustic music up to that point was not that. And so I heard him play, and I was just like, whoa, like, this is a whole different thing. And so that really steered me down the acoustic direction, and that's how I ended up at Hudson Dalton. So then, yeah, 10 years later, after getting laid off, and I'm up in Traverse City seeing Kelly Joe, and he had his national, and people just like lost their minds about this guitar. You know, like they're yelling questions about it in between songs, like what year is it, and like what's it made out of, you know, all of that. It's just Resonators. There's just so much guitar, you know, like they're just so loud, and they're metal. You know, like people who don't even play guitar think that's cool. So
Right.
So yeah, it was definitely like leaving there like this could be something. And he had made a joke about it blinding the audience, like the plating. And I think that's what kind of spurred on the like, well, I'm a guitar player. I like the materials. Like, what if it looked like more like the natural, you know, steel or brass that it was made out of? So that was kind of the combination of those two ideas.
Right. Was it? Did you find it was a big learning curve going from, you know, the traditional working with wood and, like you say, binding instruments and things like that, to trying to make a similar thing out of metal, or was it fairly straightforward?
Oh, it totally was. I mean, it's totally different. What the guitar experience before that helped with was like carving, sanding, staining, setting necks, and then like the geometry that needs to happen, being able to understand that stuff. Like, you know, your cones are certain heights, so how deep does the sound will have to be to get a certain neck pitch because your saddle height and your hand rest. Having the guitar knowledge helped with that sort of stuff. But but there's nothing that's similar with the body. You know, it's all metal. How do you cut? I had never cut a piece of metal before. It was like, oh, you can cut steel? That's amazing. You know, like who would think? And then it's like, how do you join steel? Do you weld it? Do you braze it? Do you solder it? And the big learning curve in the beginning was because there's so few people who do this and have done this. There's almost no like resource of knowledge, you know. So it was talking to welders, it was talking to bike frame builders, it was talking to roofers, because like traditionally soldering is kind of like sheet metal soldering is reserved for like tin roofers, you know, and different sorts of joints and stuff. So I would call like a roofing place to ask them about some industrial soldering iron that they have. Be like, yeah, I want to build a guitar with this, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, you know. And so it was like trying to piece together all of that stuff, and then like, you know, having some parts water jet cut or laser cut. So then when you realize, okay, these are kind of the machines to do parts of that, all the water jet guys were saying, oh no, you need to have this laser cut, and all the laser guys were saying, oh, you need to have this water jet cut, you know. So it was just like a matter of like doing it, you know. It's like I just had to decide and put money down and have it done, and then try to learn what went wrong with it or what went right, and like keep moving forward, because there was no one to ask, you know. So it was trying to figure all of that stuff out from scratch, and so trying to figure out like what needed to be done, but then how to do it. Like, what sort of jig do you use to assemble a sound wall, you know? And so you just start making a bunch of jigs and figuring it out. So yeah, man, I mean, the guitar knowledge helped previously, but getting it started was brutal. It was a long process.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And that's kind of what I was thinking, and like one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is like there's not very many people doing, well, there's nobody right now currently that I know of doing exactly what you're doing. And the only
there's one guy, Larry Progrebo, was doing it for a while, and then he kind of got out of it, and I believe he's back and doing it now, and he builds some really cool stuff. Mike Lewis, he's in Paris, he makes them. Don Moe in Australia. And those are kind of the ones that I know of off the top of my head. Right. So yeah, we're kind of spread out over the world in our
I was gonna say, sounds like we get one or two per continent, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like in the beginning it was just kind of like, oh, I have this idea, I wonder if I can make this. And I'm really stubborn about stuff like that. Like once that itch gets in my brain, like I have to scratch it. Like I have to figure out, like, will I be able to do this or not? But then, like as it went on, it was kind of a conscious decision. Like, oh, you know, everyone's kind of playing the game of, I'm going to only use the finest spruce and the finest Brazilian rosewood, and these will be the most exclusive instruments. And by doing the resonator thing, I can play my own game. You know, it's something that hadn't been being done, and then particularly like with the patinas and stuff, you know, as opposed, like there's so many amazing guitar builders out there now, and I mean, I was really stuck in a spot after getting laid off, so I had to find something that worked. It wasn't just, well, I really like woodworking, so I'm going to build. I had to find something that would work, and kind of playing that game that nobody else was playing really helped. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it started ticking in my brain, and I wanted to ask you, because I've had very little experience with, not only with resonators, but with guitars made out of metal in general. Like, you know, the only ones, I know there's more, but the only ones that are coming to mind currently are like the Electrical Guitar Company guitars, and there's a local guy here to me who does, I played his like semi-hollow aluminum electric.
Oh, cool.
Normandy Guitars is the name of his company. It just happened to run into him at a guitar show at somebody's booth, and I was like, that thing looks rad, I gotta try that. And
yeah.
It was really cool. But I'm just thinking, I from looking at his website and stuff, like he generally prefers the sound of an aluminum guitar or a metal guitar. Do you kind of feel the same way? Like you, even for like take the resonator part out of it, because I know you do the Mulecaster. Do you prefer the sound or something about metal guitars over wood?
I've like speaking about the Mulecaster. Something that we've found is you have that open body and then you have the steel, which makes it really loud. And it obviously changes the tone of it, but something that I've really come to enjoy about those steel guitars is because the body volume is so much greater. Not that you can play louder, because that's not an issue with electric guitars and an amp, but you have more dynamics. Like when you play soft, it's soft, but you can really dig in and it gets so much louder. And what that translates to, I feel anyways, like in my right hand, is the touch that you get with like the pickups and stuff it's really something. When I get on like a normal, potted pickup, solid body guitar, it kind of feels compressed, where the lows aren't, or the soft stuff isn't as soft and the loud stuff isn't as loud, and it's kind of this really thick down the middle, which has its place obviously. But with these open body steel guitars, it's just the dynamics you can get with your right hand is really something. So I think resonators, steel body guitars is a lot like drinking coffee or drinking whiskey. Is like there's a little bit of a learning curve where the first couple times it's kind of painful, and then once you get over that hump, you're like in. You are a coffee drinker, and that's where I'm kind of at with resonator guitars in particular. Is the bug bit me pretty hard, so I definitely do prefer the metal sound right now, just because I'm pretty far invested in it. So
right, that's interesting. Yeah, it makes me wonder, just because they're as with everything, the internet kind of helps expand people's awareness of certain things. I wonder how receptive like the general guitar playing public is to some of these ideas, because like everyone's very set in the ways of the certain tone woods and all that, and I everyone's got their opinion on it. And it seems like, in my mind, I feel like it's more about the builder than the wood itself sometimes.
For sure. I agree with you. I think, for one in particular, like resonators are definitely a niche thing, and so the internet has made it's never been easier to find your niche. Like there are resonator guitar internet forums where all the resonator players of the world can get and geek out, and I think you bring up a good point too, with it being about the builder, and that's something that I'm pretty explicit about. Like I try to describe the sound of these guitars in as basic terms as possible, just because it's so hard to describe sound, in words, especially on the internet, because everything can be expanded so much further. This is the bassiest, this is R00 guitar is balanced and sweet, but yet booms with the low end of a dreadnought. And it's like,
right.
It's not true. Like you're just saying words to sell guitars, like your 00 does not have to be a dreadnought to, make this accessible to everyone. It is what it is. And when you buy a guitar from a builder, it's about that connection with the person that's making it, because this guitar is not in the world. I can give you a rough, idea of what this guitar will sound like, but in the end, this is the guitar that you as the customer helped create and bring into the world. it is what it is. That's the fun part about guitars. You know, I'm not tapping the steel. I'm not deflecting, testing, whatever. You know, there are things that I do to control the sound, of course. But in the end, it is what it is, and that's what's awesome about instruments is I don't have this imminent control over every, EQ level to try to, bring out that mid sound that you've always wanted. Just, enjoy the instrument for what it is and the process with the builder, and then you get a guitar that's really fun and teaches you things about sound. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That you touched on some points where I was kind of headed with that tone wood topic. I do know that, like, in my experience, I've picked up, two guitars that were supposedly the same from the same factory or from the same builder, and one was good and one I didn't like.
Yeah.
I think everybody's ran into that. What I was thinking is, like, with steel and the way that you spend so much time with each guitar, seems like there would be a lot less variance with steel than there would be with wood.
Yeah, you would think, and I think in in certain terms there is less variance. Like, I don't want to give the impression that like all of these are incredibly different instruments, but they are. I mean, we're coming up on like number 300 here pretty soon.
Nice.
And I mean, every single guitar that I sit and play on, I hear new stuff. It's because, I mean, steel is still a created thing. It's not this like scientific laboratory controlled thing. Like, you're heating up elements and melting them, and it's cooling and all of that stuff. So there is some randomness involved. There's also, like, a big thing with building these mules in particular is like the tension in the back. I kind of think of that as like a drum head, so that influences the sound a lot too. But yeah, I mean, steel piece to steel piece, every guitar, I can have 5 guitars on the wall, and we can hear differences in them. So it's not a cookie cutter thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's
it's super fun.
That's not what I would have thought at all. It would have been like, well, this grade of steel has this much this in it and this much that in it, and therefore it is what it is.
Yeah, like the percentages and stuff. And so we use stainless steel. We use 304 stainless steel. So, like, there's differences between, like, those different steels. Like, you can get 304, but you can get 304L, which has a lower carbon content, which makes it less dense. So now it's less dense, so that's going to affect the steel. But you can also get like 304 BA, which is bright annealed steel. So the grade the alloy is the same, but with like the bright annealed stuff that we use for the backs of these guitars, what they do is after the steel's cooled, they heat it back up to a certain temperature and they hold it there. And what ends up happening is all the molecules realign. And so when it cools, everything cools in this kind of haphazard fashion. And with the bright annealed stuff, it lines back up. And it actually, because it's all lined up, it makes it a lot shinier. So when things are all aligned, it reflects. And so what that does, it softens the steel a little bit and it lines up. So you get a little bit extra bass out of that stuff. And that's why we use that for the back. So,
okay.
As much, I mean, in the beginning too, I thought exactly the same thing, where it was like, steel X is steel X, this is like mathematically it. And steel's a lot like wood in that regard. There's things that you can do to it. There's pores in the steel. So, like, when we apply the patina, we have to heat it up so that the pores expand, so that it accepts some of that patina a little bit better. Crazy stuff like that. The stainless steel, there's an element in it that reacts with oxygen, and that's what makes it stainless. And when we sand that off, that oxide layer off and put the patina on, that element is still in there, and that oxidizes with the air and reforms that layer. And so it's like, metal is kind of this really cool medium where it's kind of like wood, but there's also like these like kind of magical things that happen,
Right.
and and that makes it kind of fun.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's all fascinating. It's not what I would have imagined it to be at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It wasn't for me either. So, and again too, is like, I'm not a metal worker. I am a resonator maker. So, obviously there's guys who their whole lives have been dedicated to certain, metalworking stuff. So everything I said might have been wrong, and I apologize, but that's my understanding of it up to this point, because there's so many amazing things that guys do with metal, like sheet metal guys shaping fenders for cars perfectly and all of that stuff, welders, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I was kind of interested to talk to you. I kind of assumed that I was going to get a story that like lined up with like, I don't. So I did a little bit of metalworking, in my last job.
Cool.
As a mechanic. So like I was never super good at it, but like I was a heavy equipment mechanic, so I did a lot of not a lot, but I did a decent amount of welding and cutting and making things, fabrication.
Yeah.
Not nothing like what some of my friends do, but I did a little bit of that. And so I was kind of expecting some sort of story of, oh, well, I used to work in a steel mill, and so I decided
I was always
like
a
that.
welder and, a machinist, and I just decided to, get into guitars. I hear that a lot with like wood guitars too, like, kind of like ex-engineers finding a, early retirement job, and going into guitars and bringing that kind of world of knowledge. And man, I wish that was my story, because that would have made things so much easier. I mean, I had nothing but like Google, and like it's one thing to like find the answers, it's another thing to find the questions. And finding the questions was incredibly difficult for me, because, like I said, I had never cut a piece of metal. So it was like, how do you cut a circle in a piece of metal? It's like, so I ended up driving to St. Louis, Missouri to pick up a Pexto circle shear to cut circles in metal, because that was the way that they used to do it. And that at the time, that was the extent of my knowledge, and so I had to act on the information that I had at the time. Otherwise, you get caught up in like, is this right? Is this wrong? It doesn't matter. You just need to keep moving, and eventually stuff starts happening. But you don't know what you don't know, so you just have to do things.
That's a good point. That's something that like I've talked to people before about, like with business stuff, and it's like sometimes you just have to start before, like it would be nice if you knew everything about everything before you took the plunge. But you just have to start doing your thing, and then you will figure it out. Yeah. Or you won't, and you'll pivot and you'll do something else. Like, it's not really the end of the world, but if you really want to try something, you should just go try it.
Oh, 100%. I forget what the saying is exactly about, like, the enemy of a good plan is the thought of a perfect plan. Like, there is no perfect plan. There's 3 different ways that this thing could work, and if you're hung up on trying to find the one way, you can sit there and try to figure that out, and I'm going to try the 2 other things, and one of them's going to stick, and I'm moving on. Yeah, like with the business thing, you do not have time to sit and deliberate and ponder, and you kind of idealize certain things. You have to decide right now, and you have to do something, and move on. And I learned that at Huss and Dalton, and it's a little bit, I won't say exactly what he said, but I was a youthful enthusiast, and I was going to make this sled for making finger braces. And so I went in the mill room, and I drew this up, and I thought, and I thought, and I pondered, and I threw away. And I went into the room, and I asked John Calkin, who's like the old timer and just amazing, production type bodybuilder there at Husson Dalton, and I showed him my design. I was like, John, what do you think about this? And he looked at me. He's like, just build it. And that was it. And went back to, and it was just like, that's exactly it. I mean, that was so striking for me as a lesson. It was just build it, and if it doesn't work, fix it.
Right.
and it was, I mean, it was so pivotal. I mean, that was 13 years ago or something. And I still go back to that almost every time I'm faced with some sort of conundrum that's not just building, but like you said, like on the business side of things, is just do it, and then if it doesn't work, move on. And it's so incredibly freeing that way too, is you understand how kind of you're just lack of like capacity of knowledge is like, I can't understand if this will be right or wrong, so I just have to do it, and it will tell me.
Right.
So yeah,
it seems like we kind of have everyone does this. We seem like as a society we've kind of we have the ingrained in our brain early on that failure is a bad thing, and because like you fail a test or something, like, and that's bad.
Exactly.
You know, when really, like, sometimes it sounds super cliche because you hear everybody say it, but it's true. Like, sometimes you learn more when you fail. As long as you don't fail at like walking across the street, because that would be a bad failure. You might get hit by a car, and you're not going to learn anything from that one. But like,
I agree with you. And obviously there's a balance there. You learn from failure, and you also learn from success too. Those are both very powerful teachers. But sometimes, especially when you're doing something that is new, that people haven't done really before, or you yourself have no prior experience, and failure is the process. Like, that's like finding all the wrong answers first is sometimes the only way to find the right answer. And sometimes you have to go into that mode. But yeah, I mean, and not to get on a whole diatribe about it, but throughout school you go through 18 to 24 or further years of trying to learn things, and then you get tested on it, and you get a bright red X mark over all the things you got wrong, and then you go out and try to do work, and you're waiting for someone to tell you what's right and what's wrong, and your employer's looking at you going like, just do it.
Yeah, just build
and
it.
You're like, wait, I don't understand. Like, my brain is not, because you've gone so long being taught that what you need to find is the right answer. Like, that's what this assessment is about, is you knowing the right answer. And that is the antithesis of life, in almost every context, is you will not know the right answer, but now is the time that you have to move on and, do it. And, I think making things is such a great teacher of that. I don't think everybody has to, like a trade is not more virtuous than some other work, but it definitely teaches you things in a very direct way, that this is right and this is wrong, and you don't know what to do, but you kind of have to figure it out. And
right.
I love systems like that, like those physical, kind of teachers, where you're not at a sheet of paper or on the internet. You're doing things and learning life stuff from them.
Right. Well, since we're kind of going on this somewhat philosophical kind of tangent,
yeah,
I noticed like one of the things that kind of caught my eye and one of the big reasons I wanted to get you on the show, besides of what you're doing, is the articles that you write sometimes that seem to be very like focused on makers of really any sort. Like it doesn't just have to be guitar oriented, but I always thought that those articles were really good. The ones that I've read anyway, and I didn't know if there was some sort of trigger with those that made you want to put those out there, or is it what was kind of what's the reason behind creating those?
Well, I think the trigger is so like I said, I mean there was 13 years, 14 years between Roberto Venn and Mule. And in that time, 3 of those years were at Huss and Dalton. The rest of that time was at factories, rolling tape, the engine place, filling orders at an industrial supply company, rubber extrusion. So it was very like monotonous work in these situations, but along those in those jobs, like when you're on the line with people, I was really kind of blessed to make some friends at those places who really enjoyed philosophical conversation. I had a friend at McMaster Car, Terrence, and that man saved my life, in those jobs where it was very monotonous and we all took a great deal of pride in our work anyways, but to be able to converse about things all day long, every day, for years, you can really unwrap stuff. And keep in mind, like that whole time, my goal was to build guitars full time. So I had a lot of time loading up jigs to put into the extrusion press, where I was thinking about the shop and thinking about building guitars and kind of formulating it in my head. So I did a lot of thinking before I started doing the resonators. So with now that the resonators seem to be successful, at least how I define it, and I kind of want to share that knowledge with people who are willing to receive it, because if you don't, then you move on, But during that whole time, I didn't really have anybody that I could ask, who had done something similar. And so it was, that was a big part in why it took so long was, I had no idea what to do or what questions to ask. And so I developed a lot of opinions on things, and now that I was able to put them into practice and see which ones worked and see which ones didn't work, if I can write something and provide a shortcut for somebody else, like that is awesome. To be able to buy somebody time, maybe they're running down this road and they hear something and then they, run another direction, or they, are kind of, that spurs an idea in their head. That's pretty amazing to me. I love the guitars and I love the customers who buy them. And like I said, with that connection with the builder, this is about so much more than the guitars. It's about connection with people, and I can do that with the customers, and I can do that with other makers too, because we're all on kind of the same boat. And when it's not about the guitar, when it's about the people, now it becomes something more than weighing your brace stock and all of that stuff, which has its place and is kind of fun, but is kind of like self-serving in a way too, where I only use spruce that has 15 grain lines per inch. It's like, okay, well, that's okay, but that's not the point. The point is people, and the point is music, and the point is connection. And when you answer those big questions, it really takes you in a different way than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, that's a good way to look at things. I mean, I'm sure I know that people read them, and I know that I don't build anything for the industry, but I've even taken things out of it that I thought were they're just interesting ways to think about things. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a great mechanism for learning. So.
Right. So let's see if we can get back to guitars a little bit, so we don't.
Yeah. Okay. Let's segue.
Unless people they've already turned it off. They're like, oh no, I didn't tune in for this. This is not.
I just wanted to hear about metal stuff.
Yeah, like come on, guys, get with it. We're talking about guitars and pizza on this podcast.
Yeah. Hey, we can talk about that. Oh, for sure.
Oh, well, we'll save that for a little later. Well, I do have a couple direct questions about your guitars, though. They're definitely different than like the Nationals or something. It seems like you've taken some very specific design elements and like you talked about the back, thinking of it like a drum head. Seems like there's some very specific things that you do to ensure that yours sound different or better to you. And your customers. What can you talk about some of that stuff?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that word used was real good, different. Because I mean, to me, my thinking is there's no such thing as better. There's only different. That's why we all have or have had different guitars, because they all do different things, and that's kind of the inspiration. You can play a C/G chord on one guitar and you get a song, and then you play it on another guitar and you get a different song. You hear different things. And so the way that I do that differently with the resonators is traditionally thinking they wanted the resonator cone to do all the vibrating. So the way that they did that was with kind of stiffening up the body with sound posts and biscuits in between the sound well and the back of the guitar. And so that would provide support for the sound well and also kind of stiffen things up. So all of that vibrational energy would go into and come out of the cones. Now, in the beginning, like from what I learned at Huss and Dalton, was obviously the back of the guitar plays a big role in producing the sound as well. And with resonator guitars, typically when they sound bad, it's because they sound too thin. And the way that you get more bass or a warmer sound is by having bigger sound waves. And the only way you can have bigger sound waves is by having a bigger piece of something vibrating. If you look at like your computer speaker sitting on your desktop, you have a large speaker for bass waves, and you have a small speaker for treble waves, because both of those things do what they do well. You can't have just one do them both very well. It's not physically possible. So applying that thing into a resonator guitar, what I wanted to do was have the back vibrate more, because that's the biggest vibrational surface. The top isn't vibrating. You got a huge hole cut out in the middle and a sound well glued in there, and I know people hear differences with like the flanged F holes versus the cutout F. I can't hear it, so it's not something I think about. I think about the back of the guitar. So I wanted to get that vibrating. Let the cones do what the cones do, which is like that upper mid-range and the high end, and I want the back to do the warm stuff. So what I did was there's a neck tenon that is glued into the heel of the neck, and that stretches underneath the sound well of the guitar. And what I do is I take it's a 2.5-inch long screw that goes through the strap button on the end, and that screws into the neck tenon through the side of the guitar. And so traditionally that is cut off. There is no screw that goes into that tenon. But because I put that screw in there, the string tension is now transferred to the side of the guitar. So you have the vertical side supporting that string tension. Vertical structures are good at supporting weight. This is just a physical thing. So if I can transfer that tension to a vertical piece that's not really vibrating, I get a stronger system. And I'm also not interfering with the vibration because I don't have to brace things super heavy. So what I'm able to do is support the string tension with the side, and then I put a wedge between the neck tenon and the back to kind of tune the back a little bit to put some tension in there. But I can let the back vibrate. So now you have a large or the wide back vibrating, producing bigger bass waves. And that's kind of my thinking with a resonator guitar. Now, people might completely disagree with that, and that's totally fine. What I've learned after building 300 of them is the sound is very different, and I love it. And there's no structural deficiency with that. It's a strong system, and it's a sound that's very different than your traditional resonator, which is what I want. So, and it's all because of that 2.5 inch long screw going into the neck tenon.
That's really interesting. That's
yeah, it makes sense. When you let things do what they're kind of naturally and physically do well, I think you have a better guitar. Don't try to make your filing out in between your string slots improve your mid-range. It's like a nut is there to guide strings onto where they should be. It's not this great influencer of tone. Focus your energy where it matters, and I'm of the opinion that the closer to the saddle, the more difference you can make in any instrument. The further away you get from the saddle, the less of a difference you can make in an instrument.
Interesting, very interesting. Going back to the back. With the focus of kind of the focus that sounded like was really trying to get that back to vibrate, which makes me think that not only, I mean, yes, different players sound differently, but not only is the player having an effect on the sound with his hands, it seems like a differently shaped person would make the guitar sound different because the back is resting on them. Am I like reaching here, or is that make
you
sense?
Might be reaching a little bit. I think I don't typically play with the back against me, and if you do, like where that, and I've got a reso right here, where that wedge is between the neck tenon and the back is like smack in the middle of that lower bout. So if you were to really press that guitar against your body, you can affect the sound of it, but there's already that wedge in the middle, so typically where if it would rest against you, you're still resting against that wedge.
Got it.
So
it's
okay. Not really a dramatic difference in tone if you're, if it's sitting up against you or not.
I see. Okay, that's a little differently than what I was picturing in my head.
Yeah,
so that
for
makes
sure.
sense.
And I'm not an expert in this, but I remember reading something Irvin Samoji was talking about tuning tops, and forgive me if I'm misquoting him, but I believe he's of the opinion that the outside edges of the guitar is where that's where it contributes most to the bass response. And so yeah, you have the wedge in the middle, but as you go away from the wedge, it gets looser, so that's able to vibrate more. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking with that wedge back there.
Got it. Well, so we've talked about the guitars, but you are up to some other things, and we're getting down to the last few here, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of yes, obviously, if anyone hasn't figured it out yet, Matt makes resonator guitars, but he also makes some other stuff. So what can you talk about some of the other things you do?
Yeah, so we do the resonators, and then we started doing electric guitars. We call them Mule casters, and they're steel-bodied T-style guitars, and those are super fun. So then we started going down the electric guitar path. So then we started winding pickups. So we make our own pickups now. Adam Smith, who works at Mule, he also winds the pickups for us, and those are super fun because kind of like with the resonator stuff, I was a non-metal guy making metal guitars. We were not pickup guys making pickups. And so that was kind of fun because what we were able to do was kind of pull ideas from different pickups that we liked and put them together without any preconceived notion of, well, these Alnico 2s versus Alnico 3s, whatever. We were able to put those magnets and go like, I can't hear the difference,
Right.
But then we would try some different windings or gauge or physical structure of the pickup, and we go like, whoa, like we really like that. So we make a neck pickup that we call it's in a mini humbucker housing. We call it the Tom Thumbbucker. And then we make a bridge pickup that we call the Wee 90. That's also in a mini humbucker size. And that's been really fun because we were able to take different elements of different pickups and put them together. So even though it's in a mini humbucker housing, it's not a mini humbucker. But we liked that size. There was something about the sound of that. And being able to approach pickups in kind of that free way was pretty cool, and we got 2 pickups that we really love, and so we make those for the Mulecasters, but we also have this other site we call mulestuff.com, where we kind of sell things that we make along the way. So we sell those pickups on Mule Stuff, and then we also have tuners there that I designed and then had made. They're 3 on a plate acoustic guitar tuners for slot head and solid head, and that was me kind of beefing with kind of the mid-grade tuners that are available now. Is like it kind of felt like either you buy $30 cheapies or you buy $150 Waverleys, and there wasn't really anything in the middle that looked really nice or worked decently. So these are kind of my contribution to other builders to try to get some nice looking mid-grade tuners. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's on mulestuff.com. So that's like, and we sell hats there too. That's just kind of our thing where we like do fun stuff and put it on there and sell it from there. So
right. That's really cool.
Yeah.
There was something. Oh yeah, was there some? So like obviously a resonator and the Mulecaster are like two. Well, they're both metal. They're two very different things. Was there an inspiration for it? Like you said, I mean, we've talked a lot about metal, but in referring the music term metal, you said you used to be into metal, and keep thinking you're going to make something eventually that would be more for that genre, where the Telecaster style is still kind of like
I know. I've thought about it. The thing, really, the inspiration for making the electric guitars was me wanting to buy a TIG welder. Like, so like the resonators, they're all like formed over like jigs and stuff, and then they're soldered. The steel is really thin, and so soldering is like the lowest temperature. If you get metal hot, especially stainless steel, it will warp. And so you want to use that low temperature method of joining the metal with the resos because the steel is thinner. With the electric guitars, because there's more curves and stuff involved, you can't really form that and then solder it. So you have to TIG weld the plates. And I TIG welding for me was kind of like driving a manual shift car when I was 18. It was like one of those bucket list things where I just like wanted to be capable, It was
right.
like, so, I'm going to learn how to do this. So I really had no idea how to TIG weld, but everyone talked about TIG welding as like the ultimate like welding technique. And so it was really kind of this excuse for me to buy a TIG welder and learn how to use it. So I just do the Telecaster style ones now, and I might do a crazy metal guitar in the future. But man, we've got like 100 guitars on a wait list right now. So trying to figure out another type of guitar kind of makes me queasy. So
yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll leave it at the Rezo and the Mulecaster for now.
Call it good. Yeah, that's probably best for the customers. Hey, I ordered a guitar. Why are you wasting your time making an Iceman
right,
clone?
I know. And best for me. Like I said, I mean, this was brutal figuring this stuff out. So like every time I try to come up with a new one and get the itch, it ends up being a lot harder than I imagined.
Right. Yeah, that's true. As much as we just shouted about just do it, sometimes the process is difficult. But
sometimes you need to lay in a hammock and drink a beer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be the quote for this episode. Sometimes you just need to lay in a hammock and drink a beer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Well, so we are right down to the last few. Where can everybody find you on the internet? And then we'll go for the last question.
Okay, well, the website is muleresophonic.com, and I'm on Instagram, Mule Resonator Guitars, and really Instagram is where we update the most. So if you want to see yummy resonator building pictures and general shop hijinks, Instagram's the place to do it.
Right on. So, Matt, all right, the final question that everybody's been dying to know the whole time, which would be, what kind of pizza do you like?
The pizza, if you're ever in Elma, Michigan, is where I grew up, Pizza Sam's Pizza, okay, is the best. The best pizza. Get it baked on a screen, okay, it makes the crust all yummy and good.
Oh.
But yeah, I'm a meat pizza guy, so you put all that ham, put all that bacon, all that pepperoni on there, bake it on a screen, go down to Pizza Sam's, pick it up, and you will not be disappointed. So do it.
That sounds good. I never thought about baking
it's so
on
good.
a screen. That's
Oh
genius.
yeah, man, it's great.
Yeah. I know
I
what I'm
hate to
having.
say that. I mean, I lived in Chicago, and you'd think like, oh yeah, I know this place in Chicago. No, go to Pizza Sam's in Elma, have their pizza, be impressed.
Okay, I'll do that. Very good. Well, that's about it for this episode. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me and letting me rant and rave and talk about guitars.
Absolutely. So for Matt, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones.
One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.